Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, today we have a very special program. I am joined by my fellow.
I believe somebody is playing
Okay.
video in the background.
Okay, who? Okay, it's gone now.
Wait,
Okay,
maybe it was me. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe it was me. I'm sorry. I'm usually good at not doing that, but I think I accidentally left it open.
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
No,
Shaggy,
it
not
happens
today.
to the best of us. No worries.
I think I dated myself with that reference.
I didn't hear your reference.
Oh, I said, sorry, Shaggy, it was you.
I guess Scooby-Doo? I don't know that.
No. The Shaggy song, it wasn't me. And basically, he just goes through a bunch of... basically, just it's a whole song about
guys,
him trying to deny cheating.
Hey, guys, I can still hear it.
I got rid of mine.
I got rid of mine, too. I mean, I don't have anything else other than this open.
Oh, it was me. I was playing on Twitter. Like, I had the Twitter open because Okay. All right, so it's my fault. Sorry, guys.
What a wonderful start up to this, yeah.
Okay. Well, we, on top of that, I got my full bottle of kombucha here.
Kombucha?
You know?
I got my mint tea right now.
John?
I can get something to drink. If y'all give me a minute.
We're going to be drinking leftist tears. That's what we're going to be drinking today.
Do you have the Ben Shapiro mug?
No, but I got Steven Crowder's.
Oh, wait. Oh,
wait for it.
I need to grab this. Oh, I need to grab this.
Oh,
I can't believe I didn't think of this. It's right here.
Oh, that is a beauty.
Okay, folks, let's get ready to do this.
It's clean too. There we go.
All right. So today, it is a Papist Henrician alliance against Michael Coren, and as you know, Michael Coren is a Canadian liberal, quote unquote, Christian author, and he has recently published this book, The Rebel Christ. And it's got an endorsement from Stephen Fry. Integrity, wit, and passion, a fine advocate for the best of Christian thought. Well, glowing endorsement from Stephen Fry, who, if Michael Coren doesn't shape up, is going to be spending eternity with. So yeah, basically, I had the idea. I knew Michael Coren was going to come out with this book. He had been talking about it, and he's Canadian. Michael Coren. I know John and I are Canadian, so that rings close to home. And he's also an Anglican priest, and so I thought I'd ask my friend who's an Anglican priest who actually believes in the doctrines of the Christian faith to come on and do a 3-pronged response to this book.
Well, actually, he's not an Anglican priest for 2 reasons. The first is he's only ordained a deacon, and the second is that he's ordained a deacon by a woman. So even if he was ordained a priest by her, it would not be.
Oh, he's ordained a priest now.
Oh,
he's a priest now. Yeah.
By a woman, allegedly.
Though? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it was the same
person, yeah.
Bishop who
absolutely null and utterly void.
Amen.
Amen. There we go. Okay, so
Newman smiles upon us right there.
Yes, right, yes he does.
The Henrician Papist alliance is hard at work.
All right, let me start off with a little bit of some nice stuff about Michael Coren, because I did not enjoy this book. In fact, I didn't quite finish it, but I read most of it and I did not enjoy it. When I first, the first time I heard of him was he had I guess it's called the Michael Coren Show or something like that back in the mid-2000s. And he would invite on people like Dr. William Lane Craig or others about, asking about the question of God and all that sort of stuff. He had really interesting interviews, and he was at that time Roman Catholic and quite conservative as far as I understood. In fact, he was actually opposed to abortion, opposed to gay, quote, marriage and things like that. So when you told me, I can't stand Michael Coren, I was like, wait a minute, what? Like, he's quite conservative. What do I not know about? And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the background, I had a similar knowledge of him as you did. I knew about his going from Roman Catholicism to a more liberal, progressive notion of what Anglicanism is in Canada. And suffice to say, if you listen to the reasons, they were not intellectual to begin with. It was purely emotive. It was because he himself confesses he got to know gay Christians who he felt lived a life that was more or as devout as any heterosexuals. And then from that emotivism, then came the rationale afterwards. Now, this isn't to say that he's wrong based on how he came to it, because sometimes you can come to the truth by bad reasons, but that's quite telling just from the get-go. So, like, judging from the book beforehand, like there was not much promise, but afterwards it all but solidified. I don't think he has any good reason for adopting the positions that he does as a theological progressive.
So I don't want to spend too much time on what I'm going to say here. I think it's an important thing to note. This has implications for just religious conversions in general, or whatever you want to give that, from going Rome to Canterbury. But bad reasons, I never want someone to go from one tradition to another for bad reasons. And very, very obviously, the point is that if they go for bad reasons, then you actually have to encourage them, if you want them to stay in that group, to actually not further their intellectual pursuits, especially concerning those reasons, because then it's just going to go to a different tradition right after that, if they're incompatible with the tradition that they're currently in. So you want people to turn from one group to another for good reasons. Alan, I was listening to your, James White destroys James White with facts and logic videos and all that, and you pointed out that a lot of Roman Catholics during the 90s and 2000s were leaving Rome for Reformed Baptist or whatever, and then came back recently because they realized that the arguments that convinced them to leave Rome were not sufficient, were not good. And I think that's a prime example.
Yeah, I would agree. But what makes it Michael Coren very interesting, and I'm going to have to bash the Anglican Church in Canada a little, although Father James, I think you'll agree with me on the bashing. Given the conclusions he has come to, if you're going to come to those conclusions and you are looking for some sort of religious body where you can participate in those conclusions and those people share your same ideals, it's understandable why he would have gone to the Anglican Church in Canada, given what it's becoming. It is, I think, if you're going to leave Roman Catholicism because you came to a more orthodox tradition and you want to be an Anglican, it would be much better if you were part of one of the continuing movements, like the REC or the ANCA, something like that.
ACNA, yeah. No, I agree. I will say that part of it also depends upon sort of where your location is. I have friends who, one, for instance, who left Rome and became Episcopalian, and he's very traditional, but he's like, this is the only church in my area that I can go to. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. Yeah.
I'm curious, is that Apologia Anglicana?
No, someone else.
Okay, yeah.
Another friend of mine. Good.
Well, I was going to say, because I know he's ex-Catholic too. So, so this book, of course, I'm just going to do some show and tell here. Michael Coren, since his shift away from Christianity into pro-liberalism and all this stuff, liberalism, has essentially published the same book 3 times. This was his first one, 2016. Then there was this one. I think it was 2019, this one, or 2018 maybe. And then there's this one. And it's essentially the same book. But the good news is they're getting shorter. See, if you look, they're getting shorter. They used to be like 250. Then they were about 180. Now it's, I think, 140. I think that's how long this book is. So yeah, let's get right to it. First impressions, Father James.
So there are sort of 2 categories of books that have to do with these sorts of things. There are sort of the more academic ones, and then there are the more popular, like for the layman type. And I don't think that popular for the layman type is necessarily wrong. Actually, I wouldn't even say, like, I don't think it's wrong. I think that it's appropriate. What happens, though, is with this one, he focuses on three big things, basically. Jesus was basically a sort of proto-socialist, although he says that's anachronistic, thankfully, and then the big gay thing, and then abortion. Those are the big three that there wasn't another one, right? I think it was just those three, right? There was a first chapter that sort of introduces it all.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like the three big chapters are on those three things. And he makes a lot of claims, and then he'll sort of backpedal the claims, but then he'll go back to that original point as if he didn't backpedal. That happens a lot, and we will be talking about those.
I've got an example of that, but I'll wait till it comes. And John?
I just want to point out the irony that we are supposed to follow the quote-unquote rebel Christ by taking up and agreeing with the positions of the biggest left-center political parties in North America. Like, really?
Amen, yeah.
Like, that's what the rebel Christ would do. He would just go with what the Liberal Party of Canada or the Democratic Party in the United States would do, and just go with abortions and gay marriage and all that. That's what it means to be the rebel Christ. Seriously? That's it.
Yeah.
Just agree with the stuff that we've come to in the 20th century. Like there was not really anything that is rebel worthy. Like a rebel is someone who goes against the established norms. But like the things he's advocating for are pretty much the established norms now. So like the title makes no sense. So already I'm gonna have to point out the irony.
The conformist Christ.
Yeah. No, that was the thing that annoyed me throughout it when I was reading it. I was just like, these are not, I mean, they're controversial. Don't get me wrong, these are obviously controversial subjects, but they're more controversial the other way. I am in the minority culturally. You are in the minority culturally. We are all in the minority culturally when it comes to gay, quote, marriage or abortion and things like that. An actor can go on news today and shout her abortion or talk about how she, quote, married her girlfriend or whatever. And, that's applauded. But the moment that it gets to me saying, actually, I mean, look at Chris Pratt. I don't know, the actor Chris Pratt, correct?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, he's never said anything
World.
of like, he's never said anything that's necessarily really conservative. He wore like a Gadsden flag shirt or something like that one time, and that was about it. But because he goes to a church, which is actually I would consider a pretty liberal church, but he goes to a church that has been not fully in support of gay marriage, we'll say it that way. Like that he's now some sort of rabid, fascist. According to people here, especially on the Twitterverse. So,
yeah, and the thing about he tries to tie this into politics a lot, and what's up, McVine? He tries to tie it into politics a lot, and in terms of politics, a person who's a true believer in Christ and goes to a church, a liturgical church like the Roman Catholic, Anglican, etc. When it comes to politics, the vast majority of issues a Christian can take either side on. Like, for example, both John and I are Canadian. In Canada, the healthcare, the insurance is paid for by taxpayers. It's by the government. In the States, it's private. Now it's changed a bit with Obama. Now it's kind of more of a two-tier. But the thing is, a Christian can be on something like that. A Christian can be on either side. Now, in terms of what the healthcare provides, like abortions
or sex changes or whatever.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. It's that stuff you can't support. But like, I think the vast, probably on 80% of the stuff that's discussed in a Canadian or an American election, a Christian can be on either side. Now, there are some things where, so like for example, if a Christian believes in high taxes and giving a lot to the poor. I may not agree with that, but I can't disagree from a Christian point of view because that's allowed within the sphere of Christianity. But when it comes to a few key issues, the ones Coren promotes, you can't take those positions, and it's very dangerous. It's ironic that he collapsed. He changed his views politically, and then after he went to seek theological justification. It's not like he was studying the scripture and he's like, oh, well, maybe this actually means you can have gay marriage. No. He changed based on emotion, and then he went on to read the so-called scholarship that justifies his new position.
I mean, one thing to consider, though, is not just the fact that he wants us to, conform with, what is basically taken as the norm today with where the culture war is headed, but he also has this. He also has to. He doesn't really explain how he comes to his conclusions from the Bible, but rather he explains away what is in contradiction to him. And that's another pet peeve of mine. So, for example, can we go into setting examples in the book at this point, Alan?
Sure. Yeah. Have at it.
So here's one.
What page?
Oh, let's see. It's a little different. So on the Kindle, it is page 129.
129. I have Kindle, so yeah.
All right.
I got paper. So, I'm such a peasant.
Actually, it's 130. So there's a very interesting way he tries to explain away the Bible passage in the Gospel of Luke when John the Baptist is moving in Elizabeth's womb, in the womb of Elizabeth, and Scripture is actually saying that in those days Mary went with haste to a Judean town in a hill country where she entered the house of Zachariah and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the child leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the joy of the Holy Spirit. And his way of explaining it away was, it's a compelling verse for Christians, linking as it does Jesus, who is the Messiah, with John, who was the Baptist, who would introduce the Son of God to the world. But does it have anything at all to do about the subject of abortion? Not really. And there's this first response. First, because it merely describes movement in the womb. Now, this is completely question-begging because it describes the movement of John the Baptist, who is a person. And if he's not a person, then you have to say that Mary doesn't have the unborn child who is Jesus Christ in her womb, who is also a person. So that's never taken into account here. So he just tries to explain it away. This is exactly what I'm talking about. He doesn't actually set up the argument. He doesn't actually try to explain why it is compelling to people. He just dismisses it. And then he says, the second is this. Once again, a reference to people who are not ordinary, not usual, not as the rest of us. Good Lord, this is Jesus and John the Baptist. Other people in the Bible aren't described in these terms precisely because the gospel writers want to make a point, not about how typical these men are, but how they were the opposite. Now, they're not. Now, I responded in the notes. So they were not. So they were so special they didn't even possess an ordinary biology. Like, seriously? Like
that's a denial.
That's
a denial of the humanity of Christ.
That is, yes, exactly. It's not even a
Gnostic.
It's purely Gnostic. Not only that, but it's also a denial of the humanity of John the Baptist.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so already he comes into these very hefty theological issues when he dismisses the passage in this way. And this is why I'm saying it's not really explaining his position from the Bible. It's explaining it away from the typical defenses we usually make. Like, it's just, well, here's a little way to poke a hole in it. Here's another little way. And he never actually explores the ramifications of these approaches.
May I give... Okay. All right. One of my least favorite was, and I find this one so horrible, maybe I can try to find it. I highlighted things, but I don't remember exactly where they were. So if you guys remember exactly where it is, please let me know. But the one where he talks about pais, the Greek word for servant or son or other things like that, that one is, wow, really bad. So Pies is actually during that time it would not have meant slave, sex slave or things like that. But he opts for that option, the one with sexual connotations, as something that Jesus approved of. So apparently Jesus approves of sex slavery, which is okay for him. Because it's gay.
Wait. So basically, that's hilarious. So basically, let's approve sex slavery to own the cons.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, the neocons.
Oh, but yeah, the part of the book you're looking for is page 97. He says he basically makes his argument on that page about supporting. Let's see. In the Greek original of the gospel, the word used by Matthew to describe the servant of the Roman soldier is pious, which in the first century had three different definitions. It could describe a son, or could mean boy. It could describe a servant, or it could be a specific reference to a servant who has a gay lover, often a younger man or even a teenager. So notice that already this is not just sex slavery, this is also rape because it's statutory. When Luke recounts the same story, he uses various Greek words that have other connotations. He describes the centurion slave as an entimodoulos or doulos, which was a generic word used to describe a slave. It was not used to denote a son or a boy. So in other words, the man in question could not have been a Roman soldier's son, but entimos is best translated as honored. So now we have someone who is not a son, not an ordinary slave, but someone who, while a servant, was particularly special and loved by the centurion. Interesting.
Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Interesting. There are other examples in the Bible of people being healed, but the request for the healing comes from family members or from a close, intimate, loved people. In this case, we have a hardened soldier, the backbone of the Roman military machine, pleading that his beloved friend, his slave, could be restored to health. So, this is weird to me for the above reasons that we've mentioned. We don't want Jesus condoning statutory rape. We don't want him to endorse sex slavery. I don't understand why, if Jesus is going to honor those things, why couldn't we conceive of a Roman centurion who just had a very close friendship that was purely platonic with his slave? That never crosses Coren's mind as a possible explanation.
Well, to be fair, he does say that he's not necessarily convinced of these arguments. So I don't want to misrepresent him. He sort of but that at the same time, that really annoys me when you sort of I'm just saying, okay, if you're more than just saying,
he's not going to commit to it.
Yeah, because of problems like this. But the thing unfortunately, I was reading it on my Kindle on my phone, but apparently the notes and all that don't sync onto my PC Kindle for some reason. So, but yeah.
So I do got to put a plug in. Although my last three videos have been against James White, I do got to plug. He's got a video. It's probably about 20 minutes long, where he completely destroys this argument. It's got no ground left to stand on after. He did
which argument? Which argument?
The whole Pace argument.
Oh, Pace. I mean, Pace. Yeah.
Pace. Yeah. And he puts this to bed. I got to hand it to Dr. White there. He did a good job. Something I want to say as well is that he relies on the ignorance of the reader. For example, like all three of us are apologists, so we like to study the writings of the early church, particularly the super early church, like Clement, Ignatius, and there's a document that Coren cites in this book in terms when he talks about giving to the poor, the Didache, a 2nd century Christian teaching document, and he's like, oh, look, and he quotes about half a dozen things, and the Didache's in there. But what he doesn't tell you, because a lot of people have not read this document, you can find it online pretty easily, is that document explicitly condemns abortion.
Yes.
And of course, I'm going through this book, and I'm sure you guys were as well. And it's like, Coren, that's pretty sleazy. But
Yeah.
the sad thing is, most people have not read that document, despite it being easily available. And so I kind of wonder if he knew that. He probably did, but as long as it scores points for my side, the rest doesn't matter.
Also, another thing he takes advantage of is his readers not knowing what an argument from silence is. So an argument from silence is inferring something from what is not stated. Now, there are valid ways of doing it. So, for example, if you expect it to be there, then yes, you would actually, you could actually make the inference that that it's rational. So, for example, let's say I have a papal encyclical, and my claim is the papal encyclical is about abortion. But you read it, and the papal encyclical mentions nothing about abortion. Now, if you say that, and my response is, well, just because it doesn't mention it doesn't mean it's not about it. Well, technically, it's silent on the matter, but that's exactly my point. It doesn't say anything. So you can make that sort of valid inference from silence. Coren makes the argument that, well, actually, Jesus doesn't mention anything about abortion, which is the go-to of every pro-abortion Christian you can name. Jesus doesn't mention it. And this is lunacy. And here's a point. And here's his response, because he tries to address it. He says, well, we usually say, well, Jesus doesn't mention anything about terrorism or rape. And Coren's response is, this line of reasoning won't fly. He might not have mentioned terrorism or rape, but he did refer to violence and injustice. And surely that covers such crimes. I mean, I would say abortion is also an act of violence and injustice, but that's just me. And not only that, but he makes the same argument from silence for homosexual relationships. Jesus doesn't mention it. But guess what? There are a lot of things that Jesus doesn't mention that aren't even covered by those two things. Yet we would still want to say that, yeah, him mentioning it is a pretty good indication. Him not mentioning it is a pretty good indication that it still holds. So, for example, Jesus doesn't mention the death penalty. None at all. And I could say that because Jesus doesn't mention the death penalty, that, we can't condemn it as Christians. And he actually had ample time to actually mention the death penalty, specifically when he was being put to death. So my argument's on a lot better grounds. The Old Testament covers it. It's pretty positive about that. It's really hard to argue against the use of the death penalty from a Christian perspective, unless it's from a perspective of practicality. And Coren, last I checked, he was against the death penalty, but he would never accept such an argument from anybody.
Okay.
Just because Jesus doesn't mention it. Sorry, go ahead, Alan.
Well, and just to follow up on that, a classic line made by Coren, not just Coren, but other people as well, is Jesus never mentioned homosexuality, right? John just brought that up. But Jesus, in Matthew chapter 19, verses 3 through 6, tells us exactly what a marriage is. So he does not bring up homosexuality, but he tells us what a marriage is. And it says, and the Pharisees came up to him and tested him by asking, quote, is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause, close quote. He answered, quote, have you not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother, and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one. A man, see, there's two allusions. There's two arguments there. It implies that he's leaving his father and his mother, and he's joined to his wife, and they become one flesh. And the the thing is, Christ is quoting the Torah here in Genesis chapter 2. But it gets even better because in the Torah, it does not say the two shall become one flesh. It says they shall become one flesh. But Christ here, since he's the Son of God and has authority to express these things clearly, he makes it explicitly clear. The two, male and female, shall become one flesh. So a thing I like to say when people say that Jesus didn't say a word about homosexuality, I say to them, no, but he told us exactly what a marriage was in Matthew 19, and you're absolutely correct. Not one word about homosexuality. Boom, case closed.
If I would also like to mention, he did reference the destruction of the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, well, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and it's really hard to argue that those weren't over homosexuality. He tries to do that, though. He tries to point out, using the verse from Ezekiel, oh, it was about poverty and injustice, despite the fact that Ezekiel says, and other abominable things. So what are the...
And he destroyed them when he saw the abominable things. And what were the abominable things that were happening right there in front of them?
Exactly.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry to steal your thunder.
No, that's it. No, thank you for bringing that up. You're completely right about it. And on top of that, he does the thing where he only references Ezekiel, as if we only accept the authority of the Old Testament. Jude also says it was for the fact that they commingled with strange flesh. So there's that. And given the fact that we accept the authority of the New Testament as well as the Old, and Jesus, and that helps explicate what's going on, Jesus says that, yeah, he references that as a historical event. We know what takes place there. We know what it was about. So yeah, there is an indirect reference to homosexuality, but a reference nonetheless.
And I just like to bring up when we bring St. Paul into this, the standard thing is to go to his condemnation of condemnation of arsenokoitais and say, well, we don't really know what that word means. It could mean this. It could mean homosexuality, but it could also mean a few other things. But I mean, that's such a shallow treatment of Paul, because again, go back to his positive statements about marriage in Ephesians. Well, it's all over his epistles, but Ephesians chapter 5, it contrasts the husband and the wife with Christ and the church. And it's not two churches, it's not two Christs, it's Christ and the church. So to just say, wow, his explicit condemnation of homosexuality, we don't really know what that means. Romans 1 is just temple prostitution, so that's not a marriage. But if you go to where he actually teaches on marriage and male-female dynamics, it's the same as Christ. It's the same as the Old Testament, the Torah, the prophets, the Psalms, and church teaching until 1980 or something, post-sexual revolution. This was unanimous.
Yeah, I'd also like to add a point that Dr. Jordan B. Cooper made about baptism and baptismal regeneration that I think applies here just as well. So in criticism of Reformed Baptists or Protestants who attack baptismal regeneration, Cooper says, okay, here are the verses that I go to justify baptismal regeneration. And I get it. I understand. People who deny this have a lot of ways of explaining those verses and giving their own interpretation. But really, the fact is, I only need one of my interpretations to work. And the fact that you have to constantly bring up other interpretations means that it seems like your reading is going to be less likely overall. And I think that's a very fair statement. And I think it applies here just as well. Maybe arsenokoitai is translated as temple prostitution. Let's grant that for the sake of argument. And then we'll have to also grant that Sodom and Gomorrah never, and we're not committed to any reading where it's about homosexuality. Okay. Seems less likely because now we have to accept two hypotheses. Now we also have to accept the hypotheses that when Paul references this other word or condemns it in this other verse, that it doesn't really mean that, and we have another explanation. Suddenly, as you build up all these alternative hypotheses, the simpler explanation is it's just a blanket condemnation of homosexuality. It explains all those verses just as equally well. It's one reading, and on top of that, you don't actually have to bank on these other interpretations and all these other ways of justifying the text. In terms of just pure probability, it seems like as soon as you posit all these alternative hypotheses and readings and linguistic feats of action, it seems like you're already making your reading less probable and less likely. And that's just enough grounds to dismiss it.
Yeah, it's not, at this point, it's not what does the scripture say, it's how do I get around what the scripture says, or what these theologians says, or whatnot. What the evidence says, it doesn't matter, because I'm just going to find a way around it, you know? And so, yeah, Father James, you want to say
a few different things. So first thing is that he makes this conflation, and we talked about this before, but I want to emphasize this because I think it is important. He sort of conflates sort of the religious right moral majority of American politics with just, in general, you know, traditional conservatism and all that sort of stuff. I am very much a traditional conservative Christian. I am not a fan of the moral majority. I am not at all. I can have just good disagreements with fellow Christians and consider them full Christians when it comes to things like universal healthcare. I fully disagree with it, but I think that like no one is sinning by having that position. I just think it doesn't work well. Mm-hmm. You know, taxes. I can have differences of opinion on that with someone. You know, all sorts of things. These are within the realm of Christian orthodoxy, and he acts like the moral majority represents like it's not the moral majority. It's not the majority. That is not the position. And as another example, then he points to sort of like Trump, and there's no doubt. I would say that there is a connection between the moral majority and Trump. Like there is especially with the Liberty University and all that sort of stuff. But I am someone who, as traditional and conservative as I am, I never voted for Trump, and I would not vote for Trump because I find him to be someone who is not worthy of being the leader of this country. I'm in the U.S., by the way.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, though. Sorry, Alan, go ahead.
Well, yeah. I just wanted to say, and like, there seems to be something else that a lot of Christians in America voted for Trump. That does not mean you endorse every single sin the man's ever committed. It means you like his policies or like his policies more than Clinton or Joe Biden. That's all it means. Like, for example, in Canada here, Justin Trudeau, I know Michael Coren votes NDP, but our Liberal Party is headed by Justin Trudeau. He was caught putting on blackface. There was multiple pictures of him with blackface. Now, does that mean that everyone who voted for him, all 32% of the population or whatnot, endorses that act? No, they don't. They vote for him because they like his policies, or at least like them more than everyone else. Like,
and also, go ahead.
Oh no, that's answering all I was trying to say.
I'll say that I actually prefer many of Trump's policies to Biden or Clinton. Like, I don't like having Biden as a president, but like, you know, so I mean, that's, I guess my point here is a little bit getting away from the topic, but like the point being that there's a lot of wide range of diversity of allowance within traditional Christian orthodoxy, where you like with almost everything except for the big things that he talks about.
Well, I should also add in, this is a good time to point out some of Coren's hypocrisies. Like, I agree with you that he does conflate conservative American evangelicalism with Christianity in toto, and that's not good, especially considering all of us seem to belong to a group that says that they are in line with what the early church taught and with the early apostolic tradition and continuity. But another place to point out Coren's hypocrisy is this. He points to the fact that Christians endorsed slave owning. And one of the arguments that Christians did use, and he documents this. He says, Christians who supported slavery, quote, pointed to Abraham's owning of slaves, to Canaan being made a slave to his brother, to the Ten Commandments demonstrating an implicit acceptance of slavery by mentioning it twice. And this is my favorite part, to Jesus not referring to it, even though it was widespread in the Roman Empire. So I find that very hilarious coming from him, who uses the same argument. Now, of course, he might say, well, violence and injustice, that's what slavery is. And I'm like, okay, but the silence part, again, you're ignoring your own criticism of silence. Like, here's the thing. If you're arguing it's an injustice and you're arguing that it's a form of violence, it seems to be one that the Bible, at the very least, tolerated. It seemed to be one that Jesus never spoke up about. And suddenly we're supposed to accept the fact that, the Savior of humanity, God incarnate, could not bother speaking about this issue with people, that he remained silent, despite the fact that he was not afraid to be a controversialist or, the rebel Christ in his own time. I can't buy these somersaults that he's doing.
One other one where I don't remember if he talks. I also listened to some interviews that he did about this, and he starts talking about what are they called, residential schools, right, and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And
I'm not Canadian. Yeah, I'm not Canadian, so I'm not going to. I don't know, but and he told me, and I'm not going to say he's lying or whatever, but he told some tearjerkers, like they're pretty bad, from what I've heard, like the stories he gave. But we're dealing with a very similar issue in the United States today with public schools. Public schools are cesspools of evil, like absolutely evil. Sexual violence done by the teachers, done by other students to others. It's a hellhole. In fact, Virginia, my old home state, which has been blue, Democrat, liberal, for the past 10 years or so, has just elected a governor by a pretty wide margin to become the Republican as the governor, because of how bad the schools have been in the public school system. So, it's not like this uniquely conservative Christians have been doing this bad stuff with schooling. No, the liberals have, I would say, far worse.
In fact, it's worse because at the very least, when sex abuse happens in the Catholic Church, you can choose to opt out. You can choose not to give them any money. Mm-hmm. You can choose not to tithe. You could even leave, and there's not going to be a big social consequence that follows. However, yep. if a teachers union backs up a teacher who's been a little handsy with one of the students, at the very best, all they can do is pay them to stay in a rubber room until, and that would be cheaper than firing them.
Yep.
Especially if you can't prosecute them or fire them for this one. And here's the thing: they don't need to be prosecutable, because if this was a private company, they would fire them just for being a risk.
May I respond to a comment from? I've been reading some of the comments. It has almost nothing.
Yes, I'll allow you to respond in a second. I've been waiting for an opportunity to say, comments, stay on topic. Stay on topic of what we're talking about. Please don't go into all these other rabbit holes. You can say some, Father James, if you want.
Yes, I'm a priest within the Anglican tradition. I do find it odd that this is. I shouldn't be wearing this because I'm Protestant, when actually, as far as I understand, the collar was originally a Presbyterian.
Yeah, Presbyterian
a Presbyterian piece of clothing. So, I'm anyway. So
okay, all right. Well, thank you, Father James, and again, people in the chat, stay on topic of this book. We are going to take questions eventually, so another reason to stay on topic. I'm not going to take questions that are off topic. All right, now a thing I wanted to bring up, and I think there's this kind of, this may not make sense, but just follow with me for a second. He talks a lot about helping the poor. Now, that's certainly a Christian thing. Christ talked about helping the poor. But I think he turns it into a way to emphasize this, to go against traditional church doctrine. It's like, I care about the poor. What you conservative are just talking about gay marriage and abortion. I care about the poor, like Christ wanted. It kind of reminds me of Matthew chapter 14, where you have the washing of the perfume, Christ being anointed, and then there's people that say, "Oh, that could have been sold to give to the poor," and Christ says, "No, the poor you'll always have to help. This person has done a good thing. Wherever the gospel is preached around the globe, people will hear of this act." And so I think what Christ was going to say there, he certainly cared about the poor. Christ did. That's all over the scriptures. But it can't come at the expense of church doctrine, because the most important doctrine was at stake there, the doctrine of the atonement, the most important doctrine. That's how we get salvation, right? And so, yes, the poor, it's important to help them. But the number one thing is you got to get your theology straight. So that's my interpretation of what Coren says, because at the very beginning of the book, he's got this story where he buys some food for a homeless guy. Yeah, tearing on the emotional heartstrings. And so
he lost heaven points for that too. He lost heaven points for that too, because he bragged about it.
Yes. I thought about that too. Like, don't let the left hand see what the right hand does. I'm paraphrasing. I don't have it. But yeah, there's that. But
I don't tell anyone about the homeless people I help every morning, 20 or 30 of them every morning. I don't tell people about that.
I see what you did. I would just like to add, though, that here's the thing. I guarantee you that if you go to most people who are pro-life and you ask them, hey, we eliminate all abortion, we make it all illegal, all across the board, but you have to do, and then submit one of the biggest welfare programs you could think of. Think of free Medicare for all. Think of total forgiveness of student debt and free university. Let's go with some big ones here. And we make that exchange. I'm guaranteeing you most people would accept it. I'm also guaranteeing you I'd accept it hands down, because that is the innocence. And that's actually another thing that aggravated me, because he said, oh, well, it's so easy to be a supporter of the unborn because you don't interact with them. They're not there to correct. And in my mind, it's like, yeah, of course they're not there to interact with. They're yet to be born. They are the most vulnerable people you can imagine. Like, do you know who else isn't going to correct you when you don't? And that whole status, that whole ramble could have applied to if there was an infanticide issue. Like a newborn baby could not correct you or speak up for itself or do any of that stuff.
And that coin flips both ways, because I can just as easily say, excuse me, it is very easy to dehumanize someone who doesn't have a voice. You know, so it's really easy for you to look at the quote benefits of abortion for other people, because you can just, literally throw away humans because they have no voice. That got me very upset.
Yeah. Are there any other? Well, he talked a lot about illegal immigration. He referred to them as the migrants, but let's be honest, it's illegal immigration. The term migrant's a fake word. It has no status under international law.
May I give my story about this? All right. So my mom is 100% Cuban. I am half Cuban. And my grandparents on my mom's side, obviously, came to the United States from Cuba. And they came here legally. And my Cuban family is the most anti-illegal immigration sort of people that you can come across. In fact, my mom's a huge Trump supporter, and she's, again, 100% Cuban. So this idea that being opposed to illegal immigration is like this racist thing towards Hispanics or whatever is just silly. Like that has never made sense to me. We don't want illegal immigration. Like, it should be legal. We want to know who's coming in and out of the country.
So I'm going to say this. I've actually had a record of defending just fairly open border immigration policies in the past. And when I made those arguments, I actually never made a moral argument. I always said it's good economically. It makes good sense from a perspective of business. It allows labor and resources to get through the border. It actually gets rid of red tape and allows you to get target criminals a lot better than people innocently just going across the border and paying people when it's hard to get the pay, like all that stuff. I mean, I just made practical arguments for it. But even if we just want to take that to the side and say there is an injustice going on there, I agree. There is actually an injustice pushing where illegal immigrants are coming across the border, where they're being displaced and coming over. And that actually has to do with drug issues in Mexico itself. And
sex trafficking.
And sex trafficking as well.
Yeah.
All that stuff is happening in Mexico, and it's happening in the southern in the South American continent as well. And honestly, that's more of a perspective of foreign policy, like actually working with those countries, helping those drug issues at their home base, actually trying, and also if there is any issue, if let's say with foreign policy, that sort of thing, Coren never actually looks into it. He only says we just need to accept them blindly without making any sort of practical or economic point to any of those concerns, which are valid. He never addresses the fact that nations do have a right to issue who can come across the border and who can't. That is just a fact. And he also ignores the fact that deportation is still going on under the Biden administration right now. So,
kids in cages.
And that happened far more under Obama when he was the vice president. That's something that he doesn't break up either, because I think at sometime in this book he tries to say, "Oh, Joe Biden is far more of a Christian than Trump because he because he goes to church, and at one time he considered a vocation for the priesthood." And it's like, but he did, or technically not him, but Obama, the guy he served under, did far more of the kids in cages stuff than Trump ever did. And as John said, it's continuing now under Biden. So that argument kind of went like a lead balloon. So
yeah, so may I go back to the question about sort of like helping the poor? Do you mind if we go back to that a little bit? All right. So one of the things that really frustrates me about the discussion about like helping the poor is just sort of the far oversimplification of everything when it comes to politics. I don't know how it is in Canada, but in the United States, it is the Republicans generally want more localized small government. So the people that you're more concerned about in sort of the prime ideology of Republicanism is that, oh, I have a question, let me go to my mayor, my state legislature, that sort of thing, rather than to the big federal government. The Democrats tend to want to centralize power and government control and all that into the federal level, onto the federal level. So we have different levels and all that. The issue that many Republicans, myself, and I'm a registered Republican. I've never voted Democrat, but I've not always voted Republican. I'll say that. But the problem that happens is that it's not that I don't want to have the government involved in helping the poor. It's I don't want the federal government doing it. And I don't want the federal government doing it because it's 10 steps removed away from the poor that I'm trying to help. It makes no sense for me to give my dollar to Uncle Sam through 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 levels of government to go to the federal government just to bring it back down to my community to give it to the guy at the store who needs money and help. Why not either give it to him myself, or if we want to have some sort of government help, do it in a local level, the city level, or even maybe the state level? That's the question at hand. So it's not a question of like no one wants to help the poor in the Republican circles. That's very far from it. There's a lot of personal, private charity, emphasis on local government charity, all that sort of stuff. It really frustrates me when it becomes that sort of false dichotomy.
That's a great point, actually. I think.
Agreed. Yeah, here's the thing, though. Like, a lot of people weaponize theology as a way of getting cheap political points, but in truth, a lot of what we should do politically is very nuanced, and that requires empirical evidence. Because while we can agree on the same ends, helping the poor, the downtrodden, the immigrant, what that entails of what we should do and how to best achieve it, that's an open empirical question that requires a lot of studies into looking at empirical data, testing which programs work and which ones don't. It's not like you could crack open a Bible and come to that conclusion, because your social and economic circumstance in a good respect does change over time. And what would have been understandable at a time when most people were merchants and farmers and needed to trade between nations, and everything was more fluid in terms of coming and going, and you didn't have the resources to police your border. Yeah, I get why the Old Testament would have had those specific policies, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, empirically speaking, in order to protect the migrant, that's what we should be doing today. Because we have different economic circumstances, we have very different governmental circumstances, social circumstances, cultural circumstances that we all need to take into consideration before doing it. And to be fair, it's not just Coren who does this. On the left, the right has this tendency to do it too. And in fact, I think it's very reactive if you look at the Canadian and American context when you see progressives doing it as well.
Okay, guys, in the chat, start putting your questions in the chat. We're just going to wrap it up shortly. Are there any last things you guys want to chat about from the book, or do you just want to wrap it up, take questions?
Well, I found out that Coren and I have one thing in common. We both have apparently a fascination and love with C.S. Lewis. I absolutely love C.S. Lewis, and he quotes him positively multiple times throughout the book, and at the very end too. And the issue I have with that is that if you know C.S. Lewis's theology, Lewis does not agree with Coren on any of these things. He said multiple things opposed to gay quote marriage, was opposed to sodomy. He very much was opposed to abortion, opposed to women's ordination, which wasn't even talked about. He actually wrote an article on something to the effect of why women can't be priestesses or something like that. So he should be target number one for Michael Coren. And I don't know why Coren loves this guy, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
well, because
maybe.
Yeah,
I think it's because they're both interested in writing fiction. Although for Coren, that's for the worse. For Lewis, that's for the better.
Yes. Everyone likes to take Lewis. Everyone. Roman Catholics try to claim him. Eastern Orthodox, atheists, and liberals, and all that.
I agree. And as much as I love Lewis, he's in the Anglican tradition, and I can't change much of that.
No one can change that.
Yeah, that's true.
Although I will say this much. Well, I can't change the fact that he's always going to be in the Anglican tradition. We can take credit for the fact that it was Roman Catholics who brought him into the Christian direction, like Tolkien.
Oh, totally.
Chesterton. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, totally. But even Chesterton was a former Anglican, though.
You guys actually make some of the best converts, and that's actually something I really like about the Anglican Church. There's just always a really good mesh, in terms
and
of
don't forget Evelyn Waugh. Don't forget Evelyn Waugh. I think Brideshead Revisited is, you can make a case it's the best novel ever written. I'm going to throw that out there.
I need to read it. I've not.
Okay. I assume he was Anglican because he was English. So I don't know how observant he was in Anglicanism prior, but I'm assuming he was not a Baptist or a Presbyterian, but I know he converted, and I love Brideshead Revisited.
Ronald Knox is my favorite. Great author. He wrote a bunch of detective fictions, but on top of that, he was a really superb apologist, and he translated one hell of a Bible.
I've read through it a bit. It's I like it. It's pretty good.
Okay, and
because John Fisher got me a copy. That's why I should point that out.
I thought it was a pretty good present.
Yes, thank you very much.
That's kind of you, John. So all right.
It was the least I can do for constantly writing polemically against your ordination. So it was also a bit of guilt too.
Well, I do have gifts for both of you coming. Did I unplug myself? Do Do you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Is it the same or?
Yeah, no, it's good.
How about now?
It's good.
Okay. I actually had this plug unplugged anyway. I actually have a gift for you guys. I've been wanting to get one, but for a few months, but there's a second edition version of it coming, so I want to get that one for you guys instead. But yeah, anyway,
I think I know what it is.
See.
All right. Do you guys want to go to the questions? I think there's only one, and it's not really on topic, but let's just answer it anyway. At Soli Deo Gloria Apologetics. This guy's not a Calvinist at all. Alan Rule, I am a Reformed Protestant apologist. Would I be able to join the stream sometime later and have a discussion on a topic? Sure. Just send me a message on Twitter or Facebook. And yeah, we could probably get some going. If it's a topic I'm interested in, like there's some stuff that I'm not good at defending. Like I know John and Father James have debated Anglican orders. That stuff is it's interesting, but way over my head. I couldn't debate that for the life of me. Just send me a message on Twitter, and we'll try to put some together. And if you want, I'm sure John or Father James would be okay if you guys wanted to talk on their you wanted to talk on their channel as well.
Ooh,
transubstantiation.
Actually, that might be an interesting three-way dialogue between Solo Deo Gloria, me, and Father James, because while we all have a view of the real presence, it's different in relation to one another. So that might be interesting because I take transubstantiation, Father James takes sacramental union. I know you don't like consubstantiation, so I'll say sacramental union. Yeah. And if Sola Deo Gloria is in keeping with his lineage, it's probably a spiritual presence a la Calvin.
I wonder if we should try to get like someone like Dr. Stephen Nemish there too. Which, speaking of which, I still need to get a response video to that one that he did with Cameron Bertuzzi. The symbolic only one is the one I have the most dislike for by far. Well, I think we can all agree there.
Yeah, well, actually, one thing we can do is just instead of actually doing a video, we can have a bit of performance art and say it's a memorial of an actual video.
This represents my my debunking video. Therefore, I have debunked you.
Okay, there's a question by Pluvio Augustine. It says, Alan Rule, didn't Coren leave and rejoin the church multiple times before in the 80s and 90s? Yes, that's true. He became a Catholic in like 86 or 87. I can't remember the exact year. At one point in the 90s, he became an evangelical, and he was there for a bit. Then he went back to the Catholic Church, and he wrote the book, Why Catholics Are Right and stuff. He starts being like so hardcore Catholic. Then he collapses on the type of issues you find in this book, and then he converts to the Anglican Church. Although there's something interesting in here, he says that the Anglican Church of Canada, although they allow individual priests to do what they want, they officially, or at least at the time of this book, they officially don't accept gay marriage because it needs a 2/3 majority, and they're only at apparently the last time they voted, they're at 62 or 3%. So close, but it's still not. So technically, Coren joined a church, the Anglican Church of Canada, that rejects gay marriage, although it does allow priests to make up their individual.
It turns a blind eye, basically.
Yeah.
So that's. Well, and what's interesting is even the Church of England, and Church of England is really liberal, but actually when it comes to the question of marriage, they've been stronger than I was expecting. So they will allow clergy to, quote, get married, not by the church, but by the state, but they have to remain celibate, which is a really odd position.
That is odd.
I can't fathom it, but like because it's not a marriage if it's celibate like that. But yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of an email, my email, it's public, but I'll just say it here, is ALRUHL25, the numbers, at gmail.com. So alrule25 at gmail.com. So send an email, and we'll set something up. You hold a spiritual presence, okay? I just sent you an email. Oh, there he is. All right, another question. Sir Joseph Pope, better than Michael Coren, Canada's best and most sincere Catholic apologist. I've never heard of Sir Joseph Pope. Have you, John?
I haven't, but this is going to pique my interest. So give me a week, and I should do some basic research. Probably not going to read a book, but I'll have enough to at least know his background and stuff.
All right. Are there any more questions? Are there any more questions? And then we can wrap this baby up. Sir Joseph Pope was a historian and secretary of John A. Macdonald. For those Americans out there, Sir John A. Macdonald was the first prime minister of Canada. So he's like the George Washington of Canada.
I think there's a story where he used to drink quite a bit. I think story. I think there was a story where he was in the middle of a debate with one of his opponents, and he was visibly drunk. And when his opponent was pointing it out to him about how terrible he was, how much of a drunkard he was, John A. Macdonald got up to the podium and started vomiting in front of everybody. And then he stood up, got on the podium, and said, "Sir, this is what I think of you." I'm not sure if that has a real historical basis or not, but yeah, I just find that hilarious. I wish it was. I hope it's true.
That sounds amazing.
that takes Churchill and goes one step up, because Churchill was like, it's like you're drunk. It's like, yeah, well, you're ugly, and tomorrow I'll be sober. But I expected something like that. But
when I heard that, I don't know if though. Yeah, I heard that I don't know if it's true or not, but it was something to the effect of like a woman said to him, "If I were your wife, I would put poison in your coffee," and he said, "If I were your husband, I'd drink it."
Yeah, so many good Churchill quotes. He's got some of the best quotes on planet Earth. Churchill, let me say, had a lot of flaws, but boy, was he witty. Great show, guys. Thank you, Holly. Alan Rowe, I just want to join the stream that is live right now. If you're okay, we're just wrapping up. But I will have you on either with myself or with John or Father James if they want to join, because I like good theological discussions. Transubstantiation, that's one heck of a topic. So yeah, we'll do that. So I'm going to give it looks like we're out of questions. So Father James, you are an Anglican priest, and Coren is an Anglican priest, so I guess you guys got that bond. I'm going to give you the last word from Anglican priest to Anglican priest here.
All right, did either of you want to say something before then?
Could I just say one thing?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I just want to say, if anybody is looking for a book that quickly summarizes all the gotchas you can find on Progressive Christian Twitter, and on the Progressive Christian side of the debate, this is actually a pretty good collection of them. It has all of the terrible gotchas they use. So if you just want a quick summary of all those, I would highly recommend getting this book. And that's the only reason.
What's the book? I didn't see.
The Coren book, the one we're reviewing.
Oh, I thought you said refutation. Okay.
I get what you're saying. If you just want a quick, collection of all the terrible justifications progressive Christians use without too much more in-depth insight or defense, this is the book to get it.
Yeah. All right, Father James, last word.
First, we don't call ourselves Anglican priests. We are priests within the Anglican tradition. He is not even a priest anyway, although you guys don't think I'm a priest, but that's okay. But
there is an argument we had for you, though.
Okay, yeah. We definitely would say he's not a priest. And not because he's liberal or anything like that, but because he's not validly ordained. And so the thing that annoys me about, hopefully this won't be too long, but the thing that really annoys me about sort of the liberal progressive Christianity is that I don't know if they're just lazy when it comes to their rebuttals or arguments, or if they are deceptive, but either issue is bad. And what I've seen with this Michael Coren book is that, well, I would expect much more from him, because I've heard when he argued against abortion or against other things like that, he's now shifted over. So I don't want to outright accuse him of being deceptive, but like surely he knows better arguments that we would give than what he's given. And the second one is this goes to another point that I've given in some of my videos before, where I really dislike how people will just leapfrog from one denomination or tradition to another. That shows that there's not enough intellectual grounding. So they're just sort of basing all of their movements and judgments upon their feelings, and that's never a good barometer for life decisions, your feelings. So in general, do not switch traditions or political parties or whatever based upon mere feelings. Find out what your presuppositions are, find out what your grounding is, what you fundamentally believe, that what's unshakable, and then let your life work out from those.
Well said, Father James. All right, we're going to wrap it up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel, subscribe to Barely Protestant, subscribe to Original Wind Productions. That's John Fisher's channel. And we will, thanks for joining us, and good night.